Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, along with Manny Hill. And usually on Thursday night, we pick the schedule, but the schedule is now down to only 4 games, which leaves us a lot more time to discuss other stuff. And Manny, I really hesitated when I got a lot of questions from fans about Joe Burrow. And I thought, okay, so he was very upset at the podium or however they do it, at the table that they do their press conferences. And it's been a miserable year for him. He's had the injury and the team is bad. And they play this great game in Buffalo, but he throws an interception or two and then they can't stop anything that Buffalo's doing. And when you're a quarterback of that level and you lose, it is absolute hell. So, people say stuff all the time when they're losing that we talk about and we break down, but maybe don't mean what they say. They're just in a really bad spot. However, so that's why I was going to say, I was going to write it off as he's obviously just upset, move on. However, Adam Schefter reported today that Joe Burrow's comments caught the ears of NFL front offices that there is at least some thought that it is a possibility that Joe Burrow could be unhappy enough in Cincinnati that he might want to be traded. And the number one team that has come up repeatedly is, and rightfully because of their quarterback situation as it's gone so far, and the fact that Justin Jefferson, his teammate and dominant wide receiver at LSU, is here in Minnesota. And I think that there still is a belief that Kevin O'Connell, at least with a veteran quarterback, can have an elite passing offense as he did last year with Sam Darnold. So my question to you, Manny, is it worth us having a discussion about what it would take, how it could happen, what circumstances there might be for the Minnesota Vikings to get Joe Burrow?
I think it's certainly worth the conversation when you consider how good Joe Burrow actually is when he's healthy. The question for him, I think, is always going to be, can he be healthy? Because really outside of, last year he was great, played the whole season. He was great, but the team around him just wasn't great, particularly on the defensive side. So he put up great numbers and was, even with the Bengals being kind of a 500-ish team, he was in the MVP conversation. So obviously he's one of the best quarterbacks on the planet when he is healthy. And I think when you factor in where the Vikings are right now with the roster that they have, this is a team that at least we all thought going into this year was ready to win right now with all of the moves they made in free agency, even the draft pick that they've made with Donovan Jackson. That was to solidify the offensive line to help the young quarterback grow and develop. All the moves they made on defense, it's to solidify the holes that they had on defense last year. I think when you're in that situation now, and when you've kind of underperformed largely because of the poor quarterback play, rather it was J.J. McCarthy or Carson Wentz or Max Brosmer, I think it's worth at least having a discussion. The problem and the sort of the hurdle is going to be, all right, compensation, what is it going to take? And we can get into that. The contract with Joe Burrow, how is that going to fit into the Vikings cap situation? And I think also is Joe Burrow going to be healthy enough to make this whole thing worth it? Because he is a guy that, historically speaking, has had some times where he's been a little bit banged up.
So let's try to answer those questions. Let's start with why Cincinnati would ever do this. Because my initial reaction, even to Adam Schefter's report that it caught the ear of front offices around the NFL, and I promise you it made its way to Minnesota and at TCO Performance Center, that there was probably a little bit of a bell that rung in KOC's ears, like, a quarterback? He's in the middle of practice. A quarterback might be available. Who could it be? But my initial reaction was, no way. If you are Cincinnati, you cannot take the greatest quarterback in your team's history. Shout out Ken Anderson. Joe Burrow's probably better. A guy who is widely considered to be on the same level as the invincible quarterbacks we talk about all the time, and then ship him out. You cannot do it. You are already kind of a joke of a franchise. Look at their last offseason. They couldn't get their first rounder signed. He stinks, by the way. You couldn't get, T. Higgins, you finally sign, but those contracts, you waited so long on them. They're not very good. The Trey Hendrickson thing became kind of a mess. And then when your team was floundering, you did not trade Trey Hendrickson. So why did you sign him to a short-term contract if you weren't going to trade him at the deadline when your team was struggling? Doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense on multiple levels here of what Cincinnati has done with that roster since they went to the Super Bowl in 2021. It's just gotten progressively worse. They fired their defensive coordinator. That doesn't matter. Now he's really good in Indianapolis. It's like you are kind of a joke franchise. If you remove Joe Burrow from that, you are talking about people showing up to the stadium with bags on their heads or not at all. Empty stadiums that you're going to play in front of the following season if you have to trade Joe Burrow. But that's the key word, is have to trade, because there is history with that franchise of having to do this. Carson Palmer told them, I am not playing for you anymore. I will take my ball and I will go home. I will quit playing football rather than play for you. And they said, go ahead, Carson Palmer. And then eventually what happened? The Oakland Raiders called and said, what if we gave you X, Y, and Z for Carson Palmer? And they said, shucks, I guess Carson was really going to do it, so we'll have to trade you to the Oakland Raiders. And eventually he ends up going to the NFC Championship at one point with the Arizona Cardinals. There is a scenario, because Joe already has so much money, where he could say, I'm just not going to play again. If you won't trade me, then I will be Andrew Luck. I will say I had a nice little career in the NFL and I will move on and I will do something else. Or he could even say, until my contract runs out and those void years hit, I am just going to sit until that contract runs out, or whatever, or fake an injury. There's a lot of ways you could do this. I'm going to fake an injury for the next 2 years. This was Kawhi Leonard with the San Antonio Spurs. My knee hurts. Sorry, can't get back. That is what I will do. Or your organization could have a complete reset with a bunch of draft picks. I don't think that that's completely unrealistic. When you're talking about a team that doesn't even have a practice facility, when you're talking about a team that doesn't spend money on anything, and then they have to be bothered to pay their best players, and then they still mess that up by not managing the rest of the roster, I could see Burrow having enough power to force his hand here.
And when you look at the history of that ownership sticking with head coaches too long, I mean, how long is the Zach Taylor thing going to be a thing? I know they got to the Super Bowl, like you said, in 2021, but it's been, they got back to the AFC title game the next year and lost to the Chiefs. But really, ever since then, it's been Burrow injuries, bad defense, missing the playoffs, underperforming, high expectations. And yeah, I mean, I think when you just look at the history, why wouldn't this be something that they would do? And like you said, if Burrow comes out and says, I'm not going to play for you anymore, if you're that ownership group and you're that front office, how do you look at that and just say, and fold your arms and say, and call his bluff? Like, you can't let him walk for nothing. You can't let him just sit for a couple of years and then the contract is up and then he moves on. And then at that point, you've lost an all-time great quarterback for absolutely nothing. It's like letting him walk in free agency, essentially. So if he's not going to let you play if he's not going to let you, screw around with his career anymore, you got to find a way to get some compensation. And then that now turns to the conversation of, if he forces their hand, what does that do for the kind of compensation that they can get in return for him? What kind of impact does that have?
Okay, let me answer that in a second, but thank you so much to Pizza Gary OG with a huge super chat. My goodness, Pizza Gary. I just had some pizza tonight. I really appreciate it, man. That is way too kind. Certainly not required. Just watching is great and support enough. But thank you so much. Also, Steelhead 737, thank you so much as well for the super chat. And Steelhead's got an idea for the compensation. So let's read that and then we'll talk about it. So Steelhead wants 2 firsts, 2 seconds, some mid-round picks, Addison and McCarthy all going to Cincinnati. It says probably more, but that's the start. Burrow's cap hit the next 3 years aren't even top 10. So let's one thing at a time. So how it could happen, we established. Now let's establish what the compensation would be. I think Steelhead, you're a little bit on the high side just because we're talking about a player who is forcing his way out. Now, there will be many offers for Joe Burrow, but you're also going to have the problem is that Burrow can decide where he's going, or, oh, darn, my little toe is not capable of playing if you're trying to trade me to the Las Vegas Raiders. He would have to be involved in this in accepting a trade. He might even have a no trade clause in his contract. That's possible. I don't know. But he would have to agree to it if he's threatening, I will either not play or I'm going to play where I want to play. And that would, I think, narrow the field to maybe 2 or 3 teams. And then you're looking at the compensation for that, those teams bidding against each other. And I think that 3 firsts is probably where the conversation begins. I don't know about additional players. That's kind of hard to figure out there. Like Addison, they already have 2 elite wide receivers who are under contract. Would it have to be like Jonathan Grenard or something? Would it have to be a younger player like Dallas Turner? Because this is a full blow it up, nuclear, all the way down to the dirt. The franchise would be rebuilding, except for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. That's not really something you want to go out and get somebody who is on the older side. You're looking for younger, cheaper, so they can eventually spend money again, get a bunch of draft capital. That's what they would be looking to do. I think you begin the conversation with 3 firsts. It probably has to involve a second or 2 seconds. I mean, we are talking about someone I was going through his PFF grades over his career. 2021, he was the number 1 graded quarterback in the NFL by PFF. 2022, he was the number 1 graded quarterback, and I'm talking by 0.02 over Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. So basically right there. 2024, follow with me, he was the number 2 quarterback graded by PFF. I mean, we are talking about someone that is in the elite of the elite, that tier 1A club, not even the 1B of, hey, these are franchise quarterbacks. Like, these are the legends of the game, the Hall of Famers that you'd be talking about trading. I'm not doing that if I'm Cincinnati, unless I am getting preposterous return. Like, not Micah Parsons, it's a great pass rusher type of return, like historic, you might not even be able to trade that much legally, according to Roger Goodell type of return, which leads us to the next question of, is that a good idea for the Minnesota Vikings to trade probably historic return? Let's just begin the conversation with multiple firsts and maybe a couple of 2nd or 3rd round picks and possibly even a player that you're going to have to throw on top to get Joe Burrow.
Well, if you're trading for Joe Burrow, I would think you're probably including JJ McCarthy in that conversation to send back to Cincinnati, I would think.
Yeah, they would absolutely, because what they would have to sell to their fans is something like, hey, we got this quarterback. They could come out and say, we were extremely high on JJ McCarthy coming out in the draft, extremely high. In fact, we had him rated higher than Caleb Williams and Drake May.
If we didn't have Joe Burrow, we would have loved to have had JJ McCarthy to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what they would come out with. And of course, there's one player that's completely off limits here, which is Justin Jefferson, because that's the point, is to pair them back together. But probably no other player on the roster is off limits other than, I would say, probably Darisaw. I don't think you trade a franchise left tackle because that kind of defeats the purpose. The purpose would be that you can actually protect him, unlike the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that that's probably where we're headed with McCarthy going back the other way.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, is this feasible for the Vikings? Does it make sense for them to do it? I think I think it depends on what your outlook for 2026 and probably, I guess, 2027 kind of looks like. If you feel like this is a serious window where all you've got to do is just take one of the elite quarterbacks in the league and just drop him into your offense with that elite level wide receiver and that, elite level left tackle, and you still got some pieces on defense that can be competitive. If you're looking at that and saying this is our window now, then I think it makes some sense to do it. The other side of this is, if you make this move and you give up that much and it doesn't work because Burrow gets hurt, or something happens where you don't make the playoffs, you go 9-8 and just came up just short, then there's going to be a lot of heads that are going to probably roll. And now you're looking at a situation where you don't have any draft capital. I mean, this is a team that's already kind of starved of draft capital. They've been using up a lot of picks to move up and get guys and things like that. So it's a big swing. It's a big, gamble. What makes it so enticing, though, is if it works the way it should, oh boy,
you win the damn Super Bowl. That's kind of the point, right? That's it.
And we're talking about a quarterback that led a team with not a great defense, not a great offensive line to the Super Bowl, and had the ball in his hands in the final minute of that Super Bowl with a chance to go down and actually win the game. So it's a guy that is that good. And if you think that these next 2 years, that is your window to win the Super Bowl, and you want to go into a full-on Super Bowl or bust scenario, then you can do just like the Rams did with Matthew Stafford. F them damn picks and go for it and just see what happens.
You guys are going insane in the chat with these super chats. I just cannot thank you enough. John says, as a Vikings fan since the late 70s, I can't afford to start hoping like this. Why are you doing this to me? Give them whatever they want outside of Jefferson. Yeah, well, hey, I didn't bring it up. I was going to be like, oh man, I feel bad for Joe Burrow, but let's talk about this Cowboys game and McCarthy. But once Schefter popped his head in and was like, he did the Brian Windhorst, maybe. Then I started to get interested. And if you don't think that these things can happen, I mean, as we mentioned with Carson Palmer, but also I would look at the NBA and point to a Luka Doncic trade where sometimes a franchise gets put in a position where they feel like they have to do something like this. And it does occasionally happen. Even the Seattle Seahawks, which now we know the results of this, but when they traded Russell Wilson, that seemed insane. That seemed impossible. Why, and again, they hired Nate Hackett. They probably wasted, the last year of Russell Wilson maybe being a competent quarterback, but what? I mean, if I had told you that in, 2018 or somewhere around there, that Russell Wilson, this guy who was on a Hall of Fame track, I don't know if he's going to get there now, but was on a Hall of Fame track at the time, would just be traded, you'd say that I was absolutely insane. And that they were replacing him with Geno Smith, you'd be like, no, that'll never, ever happen. And it did. So it can happen. Jim, you are crazy for the super chat here, and thank you so much for that. It says great content, but no more Herschel Walker trades. Well, here's the difference though. Herschel Walker, he's a running back. And the whole reason he was traded by Jimmy Johnson was that Jimmy Johnson knew you cannot build a winning franchise around a running back. So why not trade him to get a bunch of other players? You can build a franchise that can be flawed as a roster that goes to the Super Bowl with Joe Burrow. And think about this. This is a guy who accomplished in his second career season something the Minnesota Vikings franchise has not done since the 1970s. We are not talking. This is like when the Lamar thing came up a couple years ago. And for whatever collusion reasons, nobody would call Baltimore and make this trade. And it was like, does anyone realize that this guy's good enough to take you to a Super Bowl? I know he's choked in the playoffs. That's not the point. Joe Burrow is good enough. He meets the threshold of good enough to take you to an actual Super Bowl. That even, we're talking about how great Sam Darnold was last year. Joe Burrow, most of his seasons are better than that. And that got you to 14 wins. And Burrow has showed up in some huge playoff games, including going to KC. Oh, wait, no. It was in Cincinnati, wasn't it? It was in Cincinnati that they beat KC. But either way,
No, I was in Kansas City.
No, it was in Kansas City, right? No, it was in Kansas City. Their
Yep.
first playoff game was in Cincinnati because I remember the people were like crying leaving the stadium. They're really going to be crying if he goes. But to go to KC and defeat Patrick Mahomes there, to go to the Super Bowl and outplay him, holy cow. Like, this is the level you're talking about. When we talk about like all-time Vikings quarterbacks, we have super fun conversations and we're like, I don't know, maybe Brad Johnson is number 3 and I'll throw Jeff George in there. It would be like Fran Burrow. Immediately, the minute he arrives here, he is the second best quarterback in Minnesota Vikings history. And if he goes to the Super Bowl and wins, he would be, considered the best. To your point though, Manny, you talk about all in. This is so far beyond all in, but there is evidence that they would consider this. And here's the evidence. There was a report last year, didn't make too many waves because, it didn't happen, that they called about Justin Herbert. And, or maybe this might've been in 2024 before they decided to draft JJ McCarthy. And when Harbaugh first got there, there was like, hey, would you want to trade us Harbaugh and you can draft McCarthy, your guy from Michigan? And Harbaugh hung up the phone. But as you should, when you have a quarterback that good, although I think Burrow is better than Justin Herbert. But the Vikings have hunted this, and they have talked in a way since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah got here about chasing the Super Bowl. The reason they went to JJ and didn't stick with Darnold, as much as that deserves criticism for the 2025 season, the reason they did it was to chase the Super Bowl. It wasn't to get to the first round and then get blasted by somebody because you can't afford linemen like what happened with Kirk in 2022. This would be a full true swing. And like you said, if you trade for Joe Burrow and he gets hurt and you go 6-11, yes, you're all probably very fired. But if you stick with JJ McCarthy next year and it doesn't work,
you go 6-11. Everybody's probably going to get fired.
Correct.
Yeah.
One way or another, this timeline runs out probably after 2026. It is a 2022 to 2026 timeline that they plotted out when they got here. And I don't think they looked past that because you can't. You really can't look past 3 or 4 years in the NFL. And you are on the last leg of that. And it was this year and next year that you're supposed to win. Well, this year you ain't winning. So next year, it would make a lot of sense to say bleep them picks for this group, because if it doesn't work, then the next people are going to have to deal with the fact they have no picks. And if it does work, they will build a freaking statue of Kevin O'Connell.
And you trade for Joe Burrow, you instantly have the best quarterback in your division. It's not even a conversation. And Jared Goff is good. Jordan Love is good. Caleb Williams is playing better, and he may end up being great down the line. But you make the trade for Joe Burrow, you absolutely, unequivocally have the best quarterback in your division, and you're going into 2026 with playing a last place schedule because you're going to finish in last place this year. So you're going to have a lot of things that could potentially work in your favor. Again, if Burrow can stay healthy, you get your line healthy, you have Justin Jefferson, you still have some pieces on defense. It's a tough division, but I think it would be a huge opportunity for them to compete in this division. It's not this division is tough, but it's not insurmountable if you can get an elite quarterback of that level.
There's a real point there, though, Manny, of if we're doing a quarterback ranking this year, Jared Goff and Jordan Love are both top 10 quarterbacks. Jordan Love might be top 3 to 5 quarterbacks this year. And I know Vikings fans can't stand when I bring that up, but the facts are the facts. The grades, the rating, the numbers, all that stuff, and the winning has all gone in Jordan Love's favor. But we know he's not perfect. Jared Goff has had another great season. They've lost some tight games. We know he's not perfect. Caleb Williams is ascending and he's getting better. We know he's not perfect. Their coach is really good. Their team's going to get better. But they have a very high bar set this year. With Williams ascending, and as Jordan Love, I think, is playing on a different level since he got Christian Watson back. And we know how good Goff is. He's not losing any of those weapons this year. All those teams are going to win. They're all meant to win. They're built to win. Their timelines, they tanked. They got to this point. They could spend money in free agency. The Bears can. The Lions are in their Super Bowl window for probably one more year. The Packers, we hear all the time how young they are with their around their expensive quarterback. All these teams built for this moment. So if you go into next year with a pop gun to a shotgun fight, you're probably going to end up with similar results. And the only reason you got 5 wins right now, other than Cincinnati and Washington really helped you out, is that dude who's the DC, Brian Flores, has propped up one of the worst passing games in Vikings history so far this year. To even have like a remotely respectable record, I don't want to call 5-8 respectable, but like within shouting distance of it. I mean, if you're going to compete with those teams to win a division next year, you have to have not good quarterback play or okay quarterback play. You probably have to have fantastic quarterback play, because you're not just going to do it with a run game and defense. And then, hey, maybe JJ McCarthy could throw for 163 yards. If this is your plan, then it's probably not going to result in a Super Bowl. Now, McCarthy might develop and get better and become a much better and more competitive quarterback, and they'll, continue to build the roster. But when you look around and go, do you have a better roster than Detroit? Like, probably not. Do you have a better roster than Green Bay when they have Micah Parsons? Like, I mean, it's, maybe, but not, probably not. And then you're going to lose some people. Harrison Smith's probably going to retire. If Chicago spends another $100 million in free agency, are you going to have a better roster than them? Like, probably not. This is the path. Like the path that has the best chance is this. Now, can it actually happen? We laid out how it's possible, but now we should answer the final question with how likely. Personally, I feel like someone, gave me some really good pizza before the show that had, energy drink lined into the sauce here with this conversation. Cause I'm like, oh man, let's talk about all the ways that could happen. Right. But give me a percentage realisticness, Manny, of Joe Burrow, Minnesota Viking, 2026.
I'm honestly going to say like 5%. I just don't realistically see, and it's not that I don't think that it's possible. I just don't think it's very likely. I mean, because look, we saw never 17 years ago, never in a million years would I have thought Brett Favre would play quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah,
while he was still playing for the Packers. I never would have imagined it. And then a couple of years later, it happened, and he had them on the brink of going to the Super Bowl. So I'm not going to say never, but I just don't think it's very likely, because I can't imagine the Bengals full on screwing this up again. I mean, you have almost like a golden goose quarterback here. And what you have to do is, you're the Bengals, you have to focus. Now, look, if he comes out and says he wants out, then you're in a tougher situation. But you have a guy this good, and he's in the prime of his career now. He's 27, 28 years old. He's already gotten you to a Super Bowl. He's fantastic. You've got to try and really continue to build around this guy and compete. Maybe a coaching change might be necessary there. I don't know how they feel about Zach Taylor. But to me, it just feels like unless somebody swoops in and absolutely just blows them away, I just have a hard time believing that they're actually going to trade him. So I'll put it at about 5% that the Vikings get in the mix here and end up with him.
All right, let's go through the responses. I mean, you're right to bring up Favre in terms of, like, don't ever say something could never happen in Minnesota. That don't ever, having been in the building for the Minneapolis Miracle with Case Keenum and having seen Brett Favre take the team within one throw across his body to the Super Bowl, something that no one had ever dreamed of. Anything, as KG said, is possible in Minnesota sports. Let me go through your responses. Justin's got it at 1%. Raymond says, great talk about Joe. He would look great in purple, but don't see it happening. But you never know. You're right. Steelhead's got it at 3 to 5%. A pipe dream, but things about it do make sense. Saberborn has it at 0.5%, and Jack has it at 100. Brian's got it at 1. Your favorite Overlord has it at 25%, and K-Skull has it at 12. So we're kind of all over the map with this stuff. Let's see. Good point by Chase. I want to talk about this. How concerned can you be with Burrow's injury history and then confidently say, stick with McCarthy? Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, right. Because he has an injury history himself. It's a little bit different. One sprained ankle that kept him out a lot longer than you expect for a sprained ankle, and one meniscus surgery. Joe Burrow is like the game operation. Like, it's injuries all over the place. And this, turf toe is one of the nastiest injuries you could get. It needs a different name. It needs like hell toe or something, because it's just awful. And he's playing in a ton of pain with a shoe. This just tells you what a psycho this guy is to keep playing for his terrible team. It's like a shoe that has steel in it or something. And it's so uncomfortable for him that he takes it off on the sideline. Like, this is what a terrible injury it is. And his injury history as part of this conversation, as we go through, hey man, look at his numbers, look how good he's been, look how fantastic this player is. If you are giving up 3 firsts, 2 seconds, and Dallas Turner or something to get back a player that has a injury history like this, it is beyond an all-in for 1 year to try to win the Super Bowl move, because you are also risking, look at the Bengals this year. All offseason, they were like, yay, we got our receivers back. We got Hendrickson back. Let's go fight. And he gets hurt right away. And your season is just completely blasted. The reason for me that I would roll the dice on that is just because what we went over in the NFC North, I have such a tough time seeing them next year have enough juice to beat all those teams and to win the Super Bowl without JJ McCarthy transforming into a butterfly over the offseason and just becoming a great quarterback. That's a long way away. And I think JJ can be a really good quarterback in the NFL. I can see where that would happen. But to do it next year, one offseason, and he becomes Josh Allen or something to compete with those guys, it's taken Jordan Love 3 years to get his coach to trust him to run a whole offense. Like, it's not easy, man. And McCarthy's going to be the gross old age of 23 next year. So, I mean, when you're going to go all in, I think you got to go all in, and that it's 50-50. This could completely blow up in your face.
Another thing to think about, and something that me, you, and Murph talked about a couple of weeks ago, is don't sleep on the mindset of the Wilfs, because that is an ownership group that, again, this is their 21st season owning this team, and they've made the playoffs less than half the time that they've owned it, and they've got 3 playoff wins since they bought the team in 2005 from Red McCombs. So you have to think, if they see an opportunity where they can get a quarterback of the caliber of Joe Burrow, a guy who has already proven that he can lead a team to the Super Bowl and lead them to at least on the brink of winning a Super Bowl, I got to think an ownership group like that, who wants to win, who does not like losing, who does not like missing the playoffs in consecutive years, no doubt. They're going to miss the playoffs this year. Do you think the Wilfs want to miss the playoffs next year? Riding it out with JJ McCarthy and going 8-9 or 9-8 and coming up just short? Right. They're not going to be happy with that. So I got to think, if they see an opportunity there, I would imagine they would at least be trying to push and say, hey, maybe this is something we need to do, because we need to win right now. We want to win a Super Bowl. We want to put ourselves in the best possible scenario to do that.
Right. And I think, those of you bringing up the Herschel Walker trade, there is a reality that if it didn't work, it would take a really long time to rebuild to a point where you are relevant again. But I also think that the Detroit Lions, the Chicago Bears, they are proof. And this is like my other little, offshoot of this, is This has always been the pro tanking show. Manny, since you and I have known each other, we have had conversations about tanking. Every time I watch Anthony Edwards play, I go, gosh, where do you get a player like that? Oh yeah, number 1 overall. Where Cincinnati, they were trash. Where'd they get a player like this Joe Burrow? Oh yeah. Where'd they get that Jamar Chase? Oh yeah. Where, right? So I could go on and on, but how did Detroit build up a team that was relevant for that long? If you go after Joe Burrow and you fail, then you will absolutely have to, you can't really tank for the number 1 draft picks, but you will be in for a very long type of rebuild that may end up looking really, really gnarly. And that's the hard part about it, is that that the wrong side of this thing is super wrong. It's probably Cleveland wrong. And it might result in all sorts of calamities, but it also is not impossible to rebuild a team. Because one of the things you could do to recoup those draft picks is trade other veteran players and move guys. And ultimately, if we're going this far down the road, you probably end up having to trade Jefferson at some point if it all blows up in your face, and then you try to get the draft picks back, and now we've gone way too far. But for me, the reason it's not the Herschel Walker trade is that the quarterback actually can take you to the Super Bowl. It was really faulty thinking by the Vikings. There's 2 levels to that. There's the you traded a guy who resulted in getting them all sorts of crazy good players, and that looks really bad for you. But also, you traded for something that's not that valuable. In this case, you're trading for something that is truly that valuable. And when you start also putting it in your mind, KOC's offense requires what? Anticipation and accuracy and timing. This dude is a freak when it comes to that stuff. This guy is Drew Brees. This is like getting Drew Brees to your offense. And can he push it to a number 1 wide receiver? Let's Google Jamar Chase's numbers. Yes. Yes, I think he can. Like the best side of this to me is so worth it, but you do know that if it goes wrong, your franchise is in for some hell for probably multiple seasons.
I think if you do it, you just better hope you win the Super Bowl, because I think the sting of that probably 4 or 5 year stretch of hell, cap hell, team being bad hell will be worth it if you're hoisting a Lombardi trophy in the next couple of years. I want to say one more thing with the Herschel Walker trade too, because people have been bringing that up. The other part of that too, I think that some people are forgetting, is the head coach of the Vikings at that time didn't want Herschel Walker because he didn't fit his scheme.
Yeah.
Bernsey did not want Herschel Walker because Herschel was not a guy, Bernsey liked the running backs that he could toss the ball out of the backfield, throw the ball to out of the backfield. Darren Nelson and guys like that who weren't great backs, but they fit a role and they fit into his scheme. Joe Burrow fits, to your point, fits everything that Kevin O'Connell wants to do with his offense. So that, I think, is a huge, huge, huge difference there, and why, at least on paper, this would make a lot of sense for the Vikings to try and do.
Zoomer KO says you trade for Joe Burrow, you now have a 10-year window. And that's another point too, that, when it comes to the cap, I should talk about the cap, because that is important. Like, can you make that part work? We kind of just sort of said, well, that's a big question. And then we talked about other stuff. So that is important to talk about. Let me talk about that in a sec. But this is a good point that let's say they trade for Burrow, and in 2026, they're great. They go to the divisional round. Things fall apart. Maybe a kicker misses wide left. Not that Will Reichard, whatever, but whatever. The backup kicker after Reichard got hurt misses wide left, and they lose in the divisional round. You're like, oh no, now you're screwed. How are you going to rebuild? But look at Cincinnati last year, and they won 9 games. They needed 1 stop on defense against the Denver Broncos to make the playoffs, and that team's horrible. If you have Jefferson still, and I don't know, we'll just say Addison for the sake of argument, and Darisaw, like those core players that are in their primes and are going to, guide you through this, you are still going to be competitive until you can build up the rest of the roster and then have other shots at it, because he's still young enough, if you could keep him healthy, that he could be in this league a lot longer. Phillip Rivers, 44, setting the new mark for quarterbacks coming back. So I think that
Yeah.
that's an interesting point as far as the cap goes, because I did see a couple people saying like this is great, but you can't afford it. So here's the thing about his cap hit for next year. You can, because he has guaranteed salary left, you can restructure it to lower his cap hit to get in the ballpark of being pretty reasonable. I just looked at this yesterday when people were asking about it. I think you could chop like 20 million off of his cap hit by restructuring it. And if you're talking about this type of play, we know that the Wilfs do not, have a tight wallet like Cincinnati does. If you're doing this, they're going to go for it. Also, imagine the resale value of tickets at that point. Like, holy cow, right? They're going to fill US Bank Stadium every single game. But
If they spent 6 years restructuring Kirk Cousins' contract, I
right.
I think I think they would do that for Joe Burrow too.
Right. And so that's another point. Like long term, yeah, that does become tricky because you have to extend him. But what extending him would do is allows you to BS that contract with void years at the end, which Cincinnati already did. That's another point of why they could actually have to trade him because after next year, he doesn't have any more guaranteed salary. They can't restructure. They can't screw around with that deal. He kind of holds the cards where he's going to say, yeah, I'll walk into that season with a 50 or 60, I forget what it is, 50 or $60 million cap hit. And there's nothing you guys can do about it because that's always set up for an extension. It's same with Jefferson. These are always set up for when are we going to extend and then low cap hit, void years at the end. And that's how they did it with Burrow. So the Vikings would be able to do that also with him eventually with a long-term extension, and then that would kind of extend out this type of window. But I mean, with the team that they have, they would be limited, I'm sure, for what they could do in free agency. That would be true. They would have to give up, a top 15 draft pick, so you don't have that player. Your roster will be flawed. But your offense, if you don't have to touch that, and then you restructure players like O'Neal, which they've held off restructuring, you could extend Grenard and lower his cap hit almost, maybe cut it in half and push that money into the future. Like, oh yeah, you'd be doing some crazy stuff to get there. But you can if you start off with a restructure for him. And I remember when they traded for Favre, and I know it was a very different cap. When they traded for Favre, I remember the story was they were like they were like all the way up against the cap, and then or not traded but signed Favre, and then they signed Favre, and it was like, oh yeah, no, they just figured it out. It's like for 1 or 2 years, you can figure out just about anything that you want to with the salary cap. But long term, it would become problematic for the following seasons. And the idea is that he's so good and Jefferson's so good that you can remain competitive after that. And then, finally, when you get your draft picks back and stuff like that. But I think there's no question about it, Manny. If you're doing it, you are doing it for pretty much 2026 to try to win the Super Bowl. And the precedent for this, I think, is probably Los Angeles. I mean, you brought them up where they said Jared Goff is good. Matthew Stafford here could be great. And we're just going to take that big swing. And it's happened before with teams and it hasn't worked. But I would credit any team that did it. And I still credit this team for trying to do it with the rookie quarterback contract. But if you're at a point where you're like, okay, McCarthy would have to have a miracle happen in the offseason to compete with Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and Caleb Williams, then you are looking at doing something like this.
And when you think about the Rams, everybody said, they went all in on the Stafford trade and it worked out in the first year. And look at them now 5 years later. They're still right here in this competitive, and they had some couple down years. Stafford got hurt, and there were some questions about whether he'd be back or if he was going to retire and all that stuff. But here they are, I guess it'll be 4 years later now. Here they are, the Rams, still one of the best teams in the league in a Super Bowl window. They've, their roster's been replenished and newer, younger players and everything, and they've done a nice job with that. But that all-in approach hasn't sunk their franchise, and in fact has put them in a spot where they're competing for a Super Bowl again because of some of the good drafting that they've been able to do and getting some of the younger players to work out. And Stafford's still playing well, and they have one of the great coaches in the league today. It's possible that you go all in on this Burrow thing, and it works out. And then it still can kind of work out after, maybe a couple of down years, you find yourself back in a good position if you make some good moves along the way.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody knows that nothing is 100% and that it could blow up in your face. And so all the points about that in the chat are not wrong. Like, hey, there's even if you trade for Joe Burrow, and let's even throw out the he gets hurt thing. Let's just say that they're really good and somebody else is great, and they don't win the division like what happened with 14 and 15 wins last year. They go on the road in the playoffs. You have a bad break. Somebody has a kick return for touchdown and to win a game or something, and you look around and you go, "Oh my gosh." Yeah, it's so narrow. The Stafford thing was so narrow. I was against the Stafford thing because I thought
I was too.
this is crazy. Like if you go all in like this and give up your draft picks and mess up your salary cap and it doesn't work, like they were able to get back here several years later, but the following season, what did they win? Like 6 games. And the next year they lost to the Lions because their team wasn't good enough at Ford Field. So it does set you back, even if you've got a great front office like that. Not fully convinced this is a great front office. I think it's a good one. I don't know that if it's a great one, but the point just being like everybody knows that. Everybody knows that if you get a bad break in a divisional playoff game and you lose, you're going to look around and go, "Oh no."
Mm-hmm.
But you've been bumbling around with 9 or 10 wins. Oh, it's a 5 win, or it's a 6 or 7 win season. It's a 10. Oh my gosh, a 13 win season that was kind of fake. Okay, 7 win season. Oh, a 14 win season that's kind of fake. And I think last year was a lot less fake than 2022. They still outscored their opponents by 100 points. So they were a good team, but once again, you weren't quite good enough to get there. And this always a bridesmaid thing, I think, is worth considering doing something insane to not be that. If there's any chance to not be that, even if you go into the season with a 10% chance to win the Super Bowl, it will be by far your largest chance to win the Super Bowl entering a season since Brett Favre walked out there in 2010. I mean, to me, that makes it worth the chance. And if this team had been super methodical with their build, if they had said, all right, 14 wins, but look, that was tough. So we're going to stack draft capital and, that was a one-time thing and the AFC South or whatever, we're going to stack draft capital. This is a longer term thing with JJ McCarthy. We're trying to build a sustainable. This is what the Packers did. The Packers, they stacked a bunch of draft capital that they got back in the Rodgers trade, and they drafted a bunch of players. They didn't go crazy in free agency and didn't make the Parsons move until they were pretty damn sure that Jordan Love was a really good quarterback. They were methodical. The Vikings have not been methodical. They went berserk this offseason. It was crazy, the number of emergency podcasts I had to do. If you went absolutely nuts to try to win in 25 and 26, then let's get nuts. So what an interesting thing to pop up that I think, everybody's going to have different opinions on, but let me give you the FanDuel question of the day. This is going to say anything that we move on to right now is going to be like, oh, well, yeah, FanDuel question of the day. Cause this is just so interesting with the Burrow discussion, and I'd like to keep going with it, and we still have to pick the schedule, which also seems pointless in comparison to this. It's like, when can they do it? Yeah, people in the chat are like, is it illegal to do it now? Yeah, it's very illegal to do it now. Yes, it's extremely. That'll cost you 3 draft picks if you call. Well, let's see. You can't call Burrow, but you could call them. You can call them. You can't call Burrow and be like, demand a trade to Minnesota. You can't send him a carrier pigeon that drops it off at his house with a note that just says Jefferson. You can't do that. But you could call Cincinnati and be like, hey, at the end of the season, would you guys be interested? Like, where does he stand? I guarantee their phones were ringing off the hook today with 10, 12 teams checking in. Just want to make sure that when the window to make this trade opens up again, that, because remember, the crazy thing about the Stafford trade was that trade was done in January, but they couldn't actually finish that trade until March, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because the new year has to begin until you can actually make that trade. So these things happen all the time before, but usually they don't happen like now. The season usually comes to an end first. But yeah, you can call. FanDuel question of the day, by the way, is the Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs against the Dallas Cowboys on FanDuel. What does JJ McCarthy have to do statistically to beat them by at least a touchdown? That is the FanDuel question of the day, because we really should get to talking about JJ McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys. But there's a Burrow connection to JJ McCarthy Cowboys rest of the season, which is there anything that he can do in these final 4 games that would make you say, actually, I'm out on the Burrow idea. I'm in with the direction. Let's just keep going with JJ McCarthy. Is there any level of performance, Manny, that could make you say, you know what? Let's stay the course.
I think we would need to see, and not even any one individual performance. I think we would need to see a collection of performances. And I'm talking about not just winning games, but can you throw for 250, 260 yards in a game that you just win and dominate by a couple of touchdowns? I mean, Sunday was great. They got the win. They dominated a vastly inferior football team in Washington. When you look up, and McCarthy only threw for 163 yards. Now, Vikings were able to run the ball a lot because they had a big lead and controlled the clock in the second half. But still, we haven't seen that moment yet from McCarthy where he just comes out and he's just throwing darts for 4 quarters and just kicking somebody's ass, just destroying a defense and just absolutely shredding. We've seen moments of, drives or, a quarter where it's like, oh yeah, there's some really good throws there. And he, led the offense really well and they moved the ball with some consistency. I want to see a full-fledged 4 quarters performance from him where he's just lighting it up and throwing darts all over the place. And I want to see it happen over the course of multiple games. And again, we've been saying this for weeks. He's going to have an opportunity to do that against the Dallas Cowboys defense. It's going to be a little tougher, not as good a defense, or not as bad a defense as he saw in Washington this past Sunday. But I need to see something like that before I have any belief that he's just going to turn this around and they're going to be in great shape at the quarterback position next year.
I agree. I think it would have to be Herculean type of performance. It would have to be win a shootout against Dak in Dallas. I mean, 320, 4 touchdowns, game-winning drive. Okay, that's 1. And then you go to New York, just doesn't even matter what you do there. Just blast them. Like, statistically, you might get ahead by so much. It's not a huge game. Beat Goff on Christmas Day. Outperform Goff. Mm-hmm. And then do some sort of damage to the Green Bay Packers. Whatever it is. I don't know what their scenarios are going to be. But, cost them something. Like, beat them at home on the final day of the season and put up like 250 plus and have PFF grades that are in the 80. Like, we're talking about Joe Burrow. His PFF grade in most of his seasons, it's like a 90. McCarthy just had his best game ever, which was like a 70. I mean, like, we're talking about a gap that is just worlds. And I know, like, it's a young quarterback versus a superstar, but like, that's how far it needs to go to get to that level where you're talking about, okay, you're going into next year feeling great. I don't think it's insane to think he could perform really well in these last 4 games. I don't think it's insane to think that he could win 3 of the next 4 games. But if it's like Washington and it's 13 personnel and, hey, here's a deep out against a cornerback that's terrible, and then run, check down to Ben Sims, run, pop pass to Jalen Naylor, run. Like, that's not going to do it. And I think if you're O'Connell, you're maybe trying to baby step your way into those last 2 games and then like roll out the full offense again. Just sort of get him some confidence. I actually think it was a good idea, right? Pare it down, get some confidence, and then see if you could build him back up over these next couple weeks. Like it's not impossible. It's probably about the same amount of odds that they trade for Joe Burrow, though. It's probably like 10%, but it can happen. These are some bad defenses, and then those games are at home at the end, and it does happen fast sometimes for quarterbacks like Joe Burrow in his second year, and I know he had way more college, play than JJ McCarthy, but he just came on in his second year, and all of a sudden it was pedal to the metal. So it can happen. God forbid they have a balanced game plan. They didn't have a balanced game plan last game. It was just running all the time and then throwing, every once in a while when you're up by 20 points. But anyway, so look, I'm done with trying to blame the game plan and any of that nonsense. You got to go play football. Like like other quarterbacks have done this in this offense. Go play football. You've got everything. Go play, go win games, go put up yards. I'm tired of this nonsense of pure progression debates and everything else. I'm exhausted of it. Sam Darnold won a bunch of games before. Nick Mullins played well. I'm just sick of that. Sick of the blame everybody else.
He's got to get better, man, and he's got to show it. I mean, we can't tiptoe around this stuff and look at 163 yards against Washington and be like, all right, yep, this is what we want to see. This is great. Like, it's like, okay, cool. He didn't wet the bed against one of the worst teams in football. Congratulations. We need to see more. It's got to be more. This team is not going to be able to compete. They have no chance to compete over the next 3 or 4 years with this guy at quarterback if he doesn't show significant improvement. It has to happen. They need this to happen. And if it's not going to happen, then they got to look elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. And that's just the reality. Like, I think we all agree that, and this is, Tom Brady, Kurt Warner, all these people, we all agree that if you could develop JJ McCarthy for 5 seasons, slowly, methodically, and every year he gets a little bit better, that it would be great. And he would probably get to a point where he could read defenses immediately and where his timing with Justin Jefferson was on point. And, if this was 1971 and the team was bad and you got lifetime contracts for players and it was Terry Bradshaw with the Steelers, yeah, like that's fine. Like, you can do that. It's not. That's not the world that we live in. We're already talking about 2026 and the job pressure, that exists. The ownership also back in the day, because people like to bring up, well, this team spent this much time with that player before they turned the corner. I don't think when Terry Bradshaw was playing quarterback that his ownership spent $300 million in free agency to build the team around him, because there was no such thing. So they just had to have great drafts and, build around Terry Bradshaw and develop him over 5 years. It's a different world. It would be lovely if you could do it, but you can't. There's pressure to make this happen very quickly. And I think that there's a good point from Joe about finding Justin Jefferson, and it's not working if you're not finding Jefferson. That's an absolute fact in this offense. If Carson Wentz, so I looked this up today, Carson Wentz hit Jefferson for 34 passes in 5 games, which if you translate that out to 17 games is 115 catches, which is Justin Jefferson's per 17 rate under KOC. So if Carson Wentz, can do that, then at least you should be able to get more than 11 yards for the number one wide receiver. And if you can't, then you're not doing it right in this offense. And yeah, of course you can be, snarky, marauder and say, 7 games is all you get. Let's look at history, man. There's a lot of examples of quarterbacks who didn't get 5-7 years to develop. And a lot of times where they do, they were playing for absolutely horrible teams who just had no better ideas. But when you look at the Trey Lance, you look at the Anthony Richardson, there's a lot of recent examples of quarterbacks. And do I think it's fair? Absolutely not. I don't think it's fair. In a philosophical world, I'd love to give him the world. I'd love to give him till he's 27, 28 years old. Look at Sam Darnold. Was it fair to Sam Darnold that the Jets were a freaking garbage fire and then they traded him away like it was his fault? And then he goes to Carolina where they hire a college coach to try to coach an NFL team, and the guy has no idea what he's doing. And then they finally fire him and Darnold plays well. And it's like, oh, okay, well, finally, and the guy has to go be a backup. Is that justice? Is that fair for Sam Darnold? No, but it's life in the NFL. You don't get forever. turn a corner here, make some plays against some terrible defenses, show that you could be the quarterback for next year, or different conversations need to start happening. So that's where we're at. And you can't erase 6 games. And also, you can't hang a freaking banner for 160 yards passing. If Kirk was playing against Washington, the guy throws for 325 and 4 touchdowns that day. That defense was a joke. It's a nice step to get some confidence, but we are nowhere close to declaring like, oh yeah, don't even call Cincinnati about Joe Burrow. You're all set because he threw for 163 against the 32nd ranked defense. Please.
And we have seen a couple of examples this century with this franchise where they were trying to build up a young quarterback, and we saw some flashes towards the end of a season that made us think, oh, maybe he's actually figured it out. And they go into the season with that guy being the starting quarterback, and then they fall flat in their faces. We saw it with Tavares Jackson, may he rest in peace. And we saw it with Christian Ponder at the end of 2012 in that game against the Packers, the game where Adrian went over 2,000 yards and almost broke the record. That was one of the best games of Ponder's career. And everybody was like, okay, maybe we've got something here. And then you went into 2013 and everything fell apart and Leslie Frazier got fired. And here we are. Then they were drafting Teddy Bridgewater the year after that. So
right. It happens fast.
It happens fast. And you have to be careful not to get too enamored with one game that you see towards the end of the season due to certain circumstances. So I think for McCarthy, we've got to see him put together a few games here of really rock solid, excellent growth and development as a quarterback to have any sort of idea that this is going in the right direction.
And here's my point. Just to be clear, I really liked what I saw from him last week. I gave him an A- for the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the only minus was some of the sacks and maybe a dangerous throwaway or two. But that was it. Like, he played really well. And I think that McCarthy has the right mentality to be a good quarterback eventually in the NFL. And I think that there is a potential here for some confidence to click in, to find Jefferson, to play some teams that aren't as great as Green Bay at Lambeau Field, and then go into those last 2 games and have a chance to really show everybody the progress that he's made. It's been really tough on him. Everything, like the pressure that he was put on, he did not do that to himself. The organization did that to him, and he didn't make his own meniscus get hurt. And that's never even happened before, where a rookie was drafted in the top 10 and had to miss their whole first season. It's been a really hard road for him. And if he gets to the end of it and you're saying, wow, you finished 8-9 and you've got a chance to go into next year and be a really good team with JJ McCarthy, that's the desired outcome. My point is just that you reach a moment where it's either put up or shut up. And unfortunately, that moment is way too soon, but it's here because it's gone so badly that you have to start putting up or shut up, because everything from the history of his first 7 starts looks like Josh Rosen. And if that's how it looks, then what did that team do? After 1 year of Josh Rosen, they were completely right. They bailed and went and got Kyler Murray. Like, that's, again, another example of like, oh, why didn't the Arizona give Josh Rosen 9 years to develop? Well, I don't know. Like, because you can't do that. You just can't. Zach Wilson didn't get 9 years to develop. It would be wonderful if you can, and maybe someday he'll show up as a Berlin Bobcat in the year, 2034. But like, that's just not how anything has to work in this situation. So it's time. And I think that I've really gotten the sense from Kevin O'Connell. It's like, we've gotten QB school all year long, and now he's just like, I got nothing left. I've taught him everything I could teach him. He's got to go make some plays. I've put on 3 tight ends. I've run play actions. I've run deep outs to get, so he doesn't have to throw over the middle and read a linebacker or anything. He's put it as well as he possibly could for him last week, and he did fine. But I also thought that some of the reaction was like he had a great game, and it was fine. It was fine. And that's the thing, Marauder, who has been one of his biggest defenders, and that's fine, says it isn't even 2 years. I mean, we are 4 weeks away from it being 2 years of him being an NFL player. I mean, you have to start seeing something. You have to start seeing something in 2 years. So,
I mean, the Denver Broncos have the best record in the AFC, and they're getting ready to go to the playoffs for the second year in a row with Bo Nix, and people are still like trashing Bo Nix as if he's terrible. So, like, why are we going so hard for this situation when we haven't even seen Bo Nix level play from this quarterback yet?
Well, because people want it really badly. Like they want it. That's why. I mean, and they were told by the team for a long time that entire year that, JJ McCarthy was the future. And then we told them, which is true, I didn't come lie to you, that McCarthy had a good training camp. I did notice TJ Hawkinson was talking today, and he said that something about how the opening script was like running routes on air, and he just sort of slid it in casually against Washington. And I was like, it was a routes on air game. But like he has shown some flashes. I think he has a competitive fire that, I think Kevin O'Connell is trying to be like, okay, let's cool it down a little bit there with the whole 9 thing and everything else after one win. But, that's always been the idea, is that you'd rather pull somebody back than try to get them fired up. So I think that there's positive things about it. It's just that when you create a situation for yourself as a franchise where you're hoping that year 2 and 3 are when your young quarterback starts to click, as has happened so many times in the NFL. Jared Goff, by year 2, has the number 1 offense in the NFL. Jared Goff, by year 3, is in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard to be a young quarterback in the NFL, and I think it's gotten way harder just in the last 2 or 3 years. I totally agree with that. That's why, in part, why, Phillip Rivers is playing for the Indianapolis Colts and so forth, although they would be playing Anthony Richardson if he hadn't got hurt behind the scenes. But the point just being, like, there is a severe lack of young quarterbacks who are able to take on these defenses. And we probably are in an era where these guys are going to take a little bit longer than even 8 years ago with Jared Goff. But it's also not an impossibility to make progress through your first season as a starter and your second season as a pro and get to the point where we have expectations for you in week 15, 16, 17, and 18. And that's why I'm saying, like, raise the bar, folks. This is the end of his season. By now, most rookies don't feel like rookies anymore. We know who they are as players, or we're starting to get that sense. So these 4 games, to me, have serious expectations and serious implications on what is going to happen in the offseason.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that, again, we've just got to see significant improvement, because the only way that this team is going to compete, the only way they're going to have a chance, especially in this division, that's the other thing. That's the other reason why the bar is so high now, fair or not, for JJ McCarthy, is you brought this up earlier. The other quarterbacks in this division are not going anywhere. I mean, Jared Goff's on the other side of 30, but he's still really, really good. Jordan Love, you said the numbers. He's really good, and he's in his mid to late 20s. He's not going to decline anytime soon. And Caleb Williams is only going upward from here. So if you're going to compete and if you're going to have a chance in these next handful of years, and JJ McCarthy's going to be the guy, he's going to have to get up to that level. Otherwise, you have no shot even in this division, let alone this conference.
Let's pick these games, because we've gone over our usual amount of time here, and I don't know what's going on in the football game, but I'd like to see some of that. Let's see. Mission Murphy says, what does JJ need to do in the final 4 games for you to feel confident going into next season? I think, because we talked about the scenario where you would like tell Cincinnati we're good, which would be, if he goes absolutely berserk and just has 4 crazy, amazing games. In order to feel confident, I think what you would need to see is him running the full offense with success. And it's not like Sam Darnold played every game perfectly last year, but if he played Sam Darnold-esque football at the end of the season, where he is running the full offense, because look, last week was you could have won this game with Tim Tebow at quarterback type of performance. And they kind of acted like it. When you run, 34 times and pass 23, like I commend them for winning the football game. God dang, the organization needed that, right? They needed a win there because it was melting into the sun at that moment. But, like anyone could have played quarterback and won that game because of the way they set it up. What you want to see is, all right, you're going to the line of scrimmage. You're looking at the defense. You're making the requisite changes. You're sending somebody in motion. All right, you're shifting somebody else. All right, now you're ready. Now you got your right look. It's not just this little half-field read versus a team that doesn't even know what they're doing defensively. It's like, oh no, make a good read. Make anticipation throws. Find Justin Jefferson, which is really going to be, I don't know if it's the right term, but like the canary in the coal mine, I think. It's like the one thing will tell us how you're performing in this offense is, are you getting the ball to him? Because it's all designed for him. I don't need perfection, but I need something like 8 touchdowns, 1 pick, run a couple other touchdowns, like make good decisions with the football. Don't turn it over. Stop taking sacks and run the whole offense. If you could get to that point, I would have a lot of confidence. I don't need an MVP like performance, but I need something like that.
Does he look like he's capable of throwing for 4,000 yards in a full season? That's kind of what I'm looking for in these last 4 games. It's not, it doesn't mean he has to average, 300 yards a game, but it's got to be it's got to be the ultimate eye test. He's got to look the part, and it's got to be the absolute driving force to them winning this game and kicking ass on offense, blowing a team out. Can you go into the Meadowlands and just whip up on the Giants 37-10 because they stink and they fired their coach? They can't stop anybody on defense. Can you show something like that and throw for 280 yards doing that? And can you put that together in the subsequent weeks after that? Can you put something together consistently to give us the sense that this is really going in the right direction? That's the only way I'm going to feel really confident going forward.
Rodder says yards don't matter, wins do. I mean, here's the thing. They kind of do, though. Like, they do. Because if we go to last year, you have your best quarterbacks in the NFL. Listen to how many of these guys threw for. I mean, Josh Allen also ran for, 800 yards. Wait, hold on. Let me switch that to regular season yards. Okay. So Josh Allen, even though he ran most of the time last year, still had 3,700 yards. Burrow had almost 5,000. Goff had 4,600. Baker had 4,500. Darnold had 4,300. Lamar, who probably should have won MVP, 41. Mahomes, 39. I mean, I don't know, man. Looks like the best quarterbacks in the NFL do tend to stack up a lot of yards. And I know I'm the person who says, hey, when you're losing, you get more yards. And it's true. You do that. Dak Prescott is a good example. But even on these winning teams, you still have 4,000-yard passers because driving success with passing is still the way to win in the NFL unless you have a total anomaly like the Philadelphia Eagles last year with Jalen Hurts, and your running back goes, what do they run for 3,000 yards a team? Okay, well, if you can do that, I will shave my head on here if KOC has a team that runs for 3,000 yards. All right. I'll look like Manny, except for my head's wrinkly, actually. It had like Shane Battier. Remember how Shane Battier had like wrinkles in the side of his head? So it's not a good look, but I'll do it if they run for 3,000 yards. Anyway, the point just being that, like if they win 3 out of the next 4 and you're throwing for 150 yards a game, I'm not going to be super confident that you could go do that for an entire season next year. Derek says, if the Vikings trade for Burrow, do you think Kwesi makes the trade or a new GM? Well, I mean, I guess that depends on when, how, and what it looks like at the end of this. I mean, if you got to the end of this season and you finish 8-9, you're probably not doing a bunch of overhauling, I don't think. But I don't know, like who could get it done? If he's capable of getting it done, then do it. And if he's not, then get somebody else who is. I mean, if that's on the table, whoever it takes, whatever it takes to get to the end. But I have not been I have not been really in favor of making that change just because they set this up to this point. But if they finish 5-12, whatever change they make is whatever change they make. Like there are consequences to actions and, stuff happens. That's the league. So let's do this, Manny. And the FanDuel question of the day, if y'all missed it, was the Vikings are 6.5 point underdogs on FanDuel to Dallas. What does McCarthy have to do to beat them by a touchdown was the FanDuel question of the day. So let's pick these final 4 games, Manny. Here's what, at least we know that McCarthy is the quarterback for the next game, and we'll see what happens after that. Do you think, as I mentioned, the Cowboys are 6.5 point favorites on FanDuel? This has, let me look up what the over-under is for points for this game, because I think that always you should expect kind of a shootout. 47.5, so a pretty high number. Do you think the Vikings can beat the Dallas Cowboys?
I think they can. I don't think they're actually going to. I think this is going to be a tough game for them. It's on the road. I know in past weeks where I've picked the schedule, I've kind of given the Vikings the benefit of the doubt of being able to go on the road and torch a really bad Cowboys defense. But it's a defense that's playing a little bit better in recent weeks since they went and got Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark. Even though he's maybe not quite the player he once was in Green Bay, he's still a guy that's kind of been a thorn on the Vikings side, historically speaking. With those 2 guys in the inside, I think it could potentially cause some problems for the Vikings. So I don't think it's going to be as easy for them to sort of light up this Cowboys defense. And that team still has really good quarterback, 2 really good wide receivers. I'm going to give Dallas the win here. I think the Vikings will compete hard, but I'll give Dallas the win.
I'm sorry. I'm distracted by laughing at Tracer XC's comment. Did Josh Allen win the Super Bowl? And well, you're right. You should get rid of every quarterback who didn't win the Super Bowl. So just have no one.
I'd take him.
Yeah, I think I would.
I'd take him.
It's really funny. When you start, I'm sorry. I know we're doing our pick of the Vikings bit, but I just can't help myself with stuff like this because when you start thinking about other franchises. So here's what I was thinking about the other day. You know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about Trevor Lawrence. And the reason I was thinking about Trevor Lawrence is, and let me just pull this up real quick on Trevor Lawrence. He plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We would all agree the Jacksonville Jaguars are a sucky franchise. They've been so bad for so long. Shout out Fred Taylor and all the other great players there. But this is a guy, Trevor Lawrence, who will have a chance, maybe this year, to win a second playoff game. He's going to have a chance. Like, they have a good defense. He's playing a lot better lately. He already has 1 playoff win. The Minnesota Vikings, since the Minneapolis Miracle, have how many playoff wins, Mr. Hill, since the Minneapolis Miracle?
1.
Correct. So Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Trevor Lawrence was still in college when that win happened.
Right. So Trevor Lawrence, who was in college and becoming known as a generational prospect that he didn't turn out to be, he was drafted in 2021, which is 5 years ago. And he has a chance to have more playoff wins than you do since the Minneapolis Miracle. And he has a chance to tie your franchise for playoff wins since Brett Favre threw it across the middle. Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. I mean, I don't even know where that was going other than just, you're saying, I know you're trolling, like Josh Allen did with Super Bowl. Who would want him? But like the level of ineptitude here when it comes to actually being in big games and relevant games, it is nowhere near as hard as this franchise has made it look to win a playoff game, 2 playoff games. If Trevor Lawrence wins 2, he will tie them for playoff wins since Favre. Holy cow. And we're talking about, hey, if JJ McCarthy throws for 160 on Sunday, that'll be great. No, I don't think that that's the standard. I really don't.
Another team that has won a playoff game since the last time the Vikings have won a playoff game?
Who's that?
The Cleveland Browns.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So anyway, I don't think they're going to win at Dallas either, but I think there's a chance because I think Dallas's offense is a little overrated by some of those playing from behind statistics. And I think their defense is an atrocity. And as long as JJ McCarthy does not get strip sacked several times by Kenny Clark, Ryan Kelly's here now, Kenny Clark. Doesn't matter if they're 5-8. They got their guy to stop Kenny Clark or Quinnen Williams or Osa Odigizua. Those guys can cause problems. Everyone else is a trash fire on Dallas, but I still think it's going to be a tough one. Okay, and also, can I say real quick, CD Lamb practiced in full. What are we doing? What are we doing as a society where we allow CD Lamb to go play a football game after last week, the concussion that he had? What are we doing? Like this is gross. This needs to stop. Next game after that is the New York Football Giants, who are really bad at football. But, Jackson Dart will play, I think, probably, if he doesn't get hurt again.
Speaking of the Giants, Daniel Jones, another guy who's won a playoff game.
Oh.
Since it was against the Vikings, actually.
It sure was. I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Funny story. I lost track. There was like a timeout. Remember, Kirk misses KJ Osborne over the middle.
Yeah.
And which oddly was the play he took responsibility for and not the check down. And when so I'm sitting next to my friend Sam Ekstrom, and so he misses KJ Osborne, but then there was like a timeout, and I kind of lost track of where they were. So he checks down, and I said to Sam, "Man, whole season comes down to this next play." And Sam's like, "The game's over, dude." And I was like, "What?" He just no. He just checked down on that play. What? So yeah, Daniel Jones has won a playoff game since this regime was hired. I just don't think that that's when you talk about like, should they fire this person or that person? And my answer is like, I don't think that's a good idea. But also, if they lose a bunch of games here, and they do, as you said, like the Jaguars have won as many games as you. The Browns have won as many playoff games as you. Like, I don't know. If they do it, then they do it. Sorry, go ahead. Vikings at Giants. We're picking the schedule here. You picked a loss against the Cowboys for them to drop to 5-9. What happens in New York or New Jersey, I should say?
I think they beat the Giants here. I think the Giants are just, there's talent there. Jackson Dart is, I think, showing some signs of being pretty good. They're just a ratty team, though, that just nothing they're doing seems to make much sense right now. And this just feels like a game that the Vikings, with the talent that they have, and again, it's going to come down to McCarthy playing well and showing improvement. But I think this is a game that can be had much like what it was against Washington. The Giants are better than Washington, but not that much better. So I think the Vikings come away with a win here.
I agree. That's a team in peril. And like when we're talking about, this is the crazy thing, is that, let me get out my calculator. Let me see what this is. This is the weird thing about the end of the National Football League season. Now I'm not very good at doing math right on the fly, but if we divide 4 by 17, there is 23.5% of the season remaining, which seems crazy, right? Like the season's over, but it's not. That's almost a quarter of the season left to go still with these 4 games. And if you go to Dallas and lose, and if you lose in New York, I know you're rightfully predicting a win, but if you lose in New York, I mean, then this whole little pocket of good vibe against Washington could just go flying out the window. And you talk about, like, that's one where when those guys get in the plane and they head toward New Jersey, they know you better not lose this. And for the draft position, like, feel free. But I mean, in terms of like as an organization, you better not collapse against the New York Giants, because that team has fired everybody. There was a report, I don't know if this was a fake news or not, so let me just, like, sometimes, you get fake stuff, that there was some conflict with the seating on the plane that had to do with them firing someone. It's like, I don't even know if that's true, but it sounds like it could be. Like, that's how funny that's how funny that position is in. Abdul Carter is just like, I'm just going to sleep. He's me in college. Like, do I want to go to this class? I was up till 4 a.m. playing Madden last night. I'm just gonna sleep. So okay, they get a win there. They go to 6 and what are we?
Six
Six and
and
nine.
nine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Then they will play the Detroit Lions at home on Christmas Day. What happens there?
I think again, like I said last week, I think the Lions are going to be fighting for a playoff position here, and I think they're going to bring it. And they're still going to be mad about losing at home to the Vikings earlier, and so I think they're going to take it to the Vikings here and win. I think pretty handily here at US Bank Stadium on Christmas Day, and that'll be unfortunate for the home crowd, but it's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. What usually happens in a short week like that is the better football team usually just wins.
Mhm.
Everybody's banged up. There's no real time to game plan. I think they get one practice, and that's why, Thursday night football, I would love to look at this a little closer, but I think that people have done research on this where essentially like the favored team usually kind of takes care of business if they're favored by X number of points. Like there's not as many upsets as there is in like a noon game situation. And if they are still alive in any way, they will be scratching and clawing because they're lions. You get it?
And biting kneecaps.
Yeah. Also, if, I mean, based on what we saw. Now, if JJ McCarthy, there's so many layers to this, Manny. That's why this show has gone so long. Um, if they go to New York and McCarthy is amazing and they beat Dallas and they've won like 2 games in a row, the Christmas Day crowd might be a little more amped up for McCarthy and be like, oh, okay, like we're back on board to some extent. Against Washington, it was not a exciting atmosphere. Once they started scoring and stuff, people got into it. But at the beginning of the game, for the whole pomp and circumstance before the game, which is usually it. I mean, some days in the past, that game last year, Week 17 against the Green Bay Packers, that place was ready to explode. I don't think we're going to have the same feeling if this team is 6 and 9. It's an average win against the New York Giants that they just got the previous week, and it's been a massive disappointment. So I don't think that the edge is going to be maybe what it has been in the past. Now, here's the hardest one. So you've got them at 6 and 10. The hardest one is Green Bay because there's a halfway decent chance that the Green Bay Packers are playing for absolutely nothing and they are just vibing in Minnesota Week 18 and it's Malik Willis and just whatever practice squad players they elevate, or there's a chance that the Green Bay Packers are frothing at the mouth in that game, desperate to win the division. I don't know which one of those scenarios is going to happen. So let's just assume it's like an average football game with some implications. I don't know, right? Because we can't say for sure. Do they win that game at home against the regular Packers?
Well, and even if the Packers, have the division wrapped up, maybe they're trying to win that game to because they're trying to kind of, they've got the ties, what that will come into play here, but maybe they're trying to leapfrog the Rams or the Seahawks for the number one seed in the NFC, which would then give them, home field advantage throughout. And who wants to go to Lambeau Field in January when it's like 10 degrees and play an NFC championship game? Tom Brady did pretty good with that, but I digress. Yeah, I think there's a realistic possibility that the Packers are playing for a lot here, even if they have the division wrapped up. But they might be in a position where their seeding is not really going to matter, and they have the division wrapped up, and then you want to rest Micah Parsons and you want to rest, Jordan Love and some of the other key players that they have. That would present an opportunity for the Vikings, but I just have a hard time believing that the Packers are just gonna sleepwalk through this game. It's week 18. I think they're gonna wanna finish the season with some momentum going into the playoffs. That's a team that's really confident right now, feeling really good about themselves. The quarterback is playing great. Defense is awesome. Suddenly they don't wanna fire the head coach anymore, which is interesting. Never never should have come down to that in the first place, but anyway.
That was asinine.
Um,
That we all knew
it's
that.
just
We
so
all knew.
ridiculous.
We all
Yeah,
knew.
it's just so ridiculous. And I say this as somebody who hates that team, but um, yeah, I'm gonna give the Packers the win here because I'm gonna err on the side of they're gonna have something to play for, the division, seeding, something like that. and they'll come into US Bank Stadium and take care of business.
Well, I would pick the same if it has stakes. Especially if they're really amped up and they're going 110 miles an hour, then that could, yeah, probably be in their favor. If you finish, what we always talk about at the end is the implications. If you finish 6-11, it is one of the biggest disappointments that we have ever seen from this team. Usually,
Totally.
the disappointing seasons are, I mean, even think about like 2018, as you and I were in the same radio studio when I may or may not have had my head explode after Kirk Cousins suggested that it'll all be fine next year. And I lost my mind.
Tough
But
times don't last. Tough people do.
yeah, well, hey, Kirk's out there. They're leading right at halftime. So
Yeah.
Kirk's grinding through it. But if they are to go 6-11, I think whatever the Wilfs decide to do with the people in charge, I don't support blowing it up. I support giving them 2026 and seeing if they can fix it, because they won 14 last year. If they won 7 last year and then 6 this year, I'd be like, okay, this isn't working. But
Yeah.
because they have 2 seasons that have been very impressive, okay, like I think that you've earned our belief that you can competently turn this around. And if you can't, then we'll have our answer. But I would also say it's 6 and the only teams you could beat are the Giants and Washington. I'd be like, whatever they decide to do is whatever they decide to do. And I'll probably just kind of roll with it after that. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, if it were me, I probably wouldn't. I'd be very hesitant to make a change at 6-11, but I would totally understand if the Wilfs just decide, no, you guys won 14 games last year. You decide to move on from Sam and put all your eggs into JJ McCarthy's basket, and it blew up in your face. Sorry, see ya. We're moving on, going in a different direction. I would understand if that's the route that they go. But if it were me, I would give them, because of the history with this regime, the ability to kind of turn things around after 2023. I would give them another year to see if that happens again and if they can, win 10, 11 games and make the playoffs. But if I'm bringing them back, I'm looking at everybody and saying, if you go 6-11 or 7-10 next year, that's your ass. You're out of here. Because that's where the pressure really, I think, in that situation has to really ramp up.
KFT says, I think Kwesi's the fall guy, and I think will deserve to be fired. Excellence is the goal. Well, like I said, I mean, if you go 6-11, I mean, who am I trying to defend? Like that is a truly terrible season. They came nowhere close to your goals, and you spent a lot of the ownership money on things that didn't work out. If you're doing that and keeping KOC, I think what you're trying to do is, and it's so funny how this works, right? You're like, culture of collaboration. Actually, we may have collaborated too much. Like, let's now hire, a football guy or something who is going to take the reins. And I think that that's what it would really be. Is it has not felt like they have a general manager who has the, how do I put this the right way? Who has like the authority over everybody else to say, it's my call, guys. And that's what they were aiming for, the collaboration. They were aiming for coaches give you the grocery list, you go get the groceries. I think they've done that. I think a lot of the roster right now, when it's healthy, looks really darn good doing that. It's the quarterback position that was not ready for this. So I haven't been in favor of, hey, blow this whole thing up. It doesn't work. But wait a minute. Look at this offensive line when it's healthy. Look at this defensive front when it's healthy. I mean, what we're going to talk about, like one safety position that isn't good. Like they found more players, Redmond and, Eric Wilson, they went out and got, and Turner's looked better and Jackson looks really good. And like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know. There's a lot to work with here going forward. So I don't think it's the right thing to blow that up. But if you decided, you know what, we gave maybe the coaches a little too much power and we need somebody who's an experienced GM to come in and just take the reins and say, it's my roster now and I will make the draft picks and I will, go out and get the players and you guys will coach them. And that's how it's going to be. That would be kind of the shift of like going from Zim to KOC. And oftentimes teams do that. So if they did that, I would not blame them, because I do think a lot of this was when coaches have a lot of power, what do they want? They want to win right now. They don't think as much in terms of, like, pragmatic is a word that I've used a lot because they haven't been that. Methodical, they haven't been that. It's, oh man, we need DTs. Get me some DTs. And then the GM says, well, okay, all right, we need these guys, so let's go get these veterans and so forth. But that's not it's like not a long-term type of thinking. It's just I need this position filled and I need you to go do it type of thing. So if another GM came in and said, oh, you want that $21 million defensive tackle who hasn't been good in 3 years? I'm sorry, no, develop someone, right? That a little bit. Oh, you want Jeff Okudah because you like him? Okay, fine. But no, actually develop this guy that I signed for you, that I drafted for you, whoever it is. I mean, the fact that, and these aren't stars, but like a Caleb Evans played last week and Nashawn Wright's played and Reddy Stewart is here. And like these young corners that they brought in, it's like, well, the coach wants guys who could play for him right now. He needs Stephon Gilmore, right? And they need a GM who says, I'm sorry, you're going to have to develop that guy, or I'm sorry, we're not spending that money, and has the credibility to do that. If that's what they decide to do, because I think their current circumstance is much more of a collaboration of let's all come together with the coaches and the general manager and work through it and then come to a decision. But the coaches took a lot of the power when they won 14 games and looked like geniuses. So, I don't know. It's a very interesting political dynamic. Manny, we'll get you a Christmas bonus for an extra show and a half here on a Thursday. Let's go watch some Thursday night football, some creamsicles with Tampa Bay. Thanks everybody for indulging the very interesting / entertaining scenario of Joe Burrow. And look, and if you didn't like this conversation, it's like 8 more podcasts this week, including a hardcore breakdown of this weekend's game coming tomorrow with Andrew Kramer. So thank you, Mr. Manny Hill, and we will catch you guys all later. Thanks, everybody.